A lot of community-based research here in Martin County, and my work is for the people of Martin County. The history that has happened when it comes to our water and our water system, it's a lot.
All this was running black for a couple years afterwards. You could still see the remnants of the sludge. And so that was something that got people upset. When it's right in your face, and yet people are saying, don't worry about it. It's not the problem now. That's been 24 years. But it's where it all began that we lost trust. Now we've got different problems.
So the water plant that we have here today was only supposed to be here for 600 customers. And then the plant grew, the plant expanded, and being able to maintain it became more of a challenge. And some of these lines have sadly not been updated adequately throughout the years as the plant grew. And so it's like we're always putting out fires. And when do the fires stop?
So in 2017, ACLC was asked to come to a community meeting here in Inez, Kentucky. There were intermittent outages all over the county because water lines were breaking, and when the water would come back on, it would be brown. And so they were very, very concerned about the quality of water. And then in January 2018, the Water Board voted to increase the rates by 50%. Because they were also recognizing that more needed to be done to address all of the water line breaks that were happening that were causing the poor water quality. And so we very quickly came to understand that, water affordability and water quality are interrelated.
We're now on the public record.
The Public Service Commission was very concerned about the poor state of the system, but also the lack of financial control. And so what the Public Service Commission ultimately decided was that, yes, the rates could go up, not as much as the system was asking for, but they also had to bring in outside management. So the system is now run by a private company.
Alliance Water Resources came into Martin County in 2020 to help with the day-to-day operations of their water system. Martin County has dealt with for many years a lack of preventive maintenance on their facilities and infrastructure. So right now, everybody in place is playing catch-up. The residents have eaten the burden for the past mistakes here. If things would have been maintained better and operated better in the past, the rates wouldn't be what they are today.
I think a big part of the affordability is the water loss. If you were going to the gas station and filling up with gas, and before you left the gas station, you lost 70% of it. It's not going to make for a good way to travel. We are heading down the Tug River toward the intake where the water is pumped from the river into our reservoir. For the last year, we've had to have a rental pump that is up to $10,000 a month just for renting, and the diesel for that pump is about $30,000 a month. It's actually basically the poor ratepayers that are going to have to figure out how to get this paid.
The reason that Martin County water is so expensive is it's very expensive to run this broken system. If the system were new and were in good shape, it would be a lot cheaper, and I think it's like that in so many areas across the country.
So we're at my house now, and we're just gonna bottle the samples that we got at the reservoir first, and then take samples from the house. It's really hard to get people to talk about their problems with paying their water bill. Because, that's an embarrassing thing. It's not something you want to just go out and talk about. And so, it's hard to get people to come forward who really need the help the most in a film setting, in a way that they're going to be talking about it. But every month we have anywhere between 35 to 50 shutoffs due to non-payment. And see, that's just sad. And it's not only sad because of that person, but it also means that the system can't run, which is why the gas company and the electric company have figured out how to make sure that the government steps in and helps those people that can't pay, because they couldn't run their system either if they had to depend on everybody paying all the time. So they make sure that they're sort of covered on the poverty end of it, but nobody's making sure that the water system has the coverage that they need.
I want to buy a house here. I want to plant my roots. I want to have a family. We should want to stay in a place that we call home and not fear our relationship around water. We have such a beautiful town and such a beautiful community. And we have all the chances in the world to thrive, just as any other place in Appalachia. But we just can't get ahead because of our system. And the future for me is I want the system to get ahead. As long as we keep fighting, and as long as we keep being transparent and doing the work that needs to be done, I really do believe we'll have a better future with our water system.
Thanks. So while Brianna gets our Laredo story up and running, wanted to offer an opportunity just to hear feedback from the audience using this poll. You can scan the QR code or go to menti.com and type in the number provided, and would love to see if we can get any live reactions while we're setting up the other story. And while that's happening, I just dropped a link in the chat as well if it's easier for you to just click in our audience. But the other thing I wanted to encourage people to do as we move southwest to Laredo, Texas, is thinking about some of the differences and similarities that you're seeing in these stories. And I encourage you to, if any questions have come up for you so far or come up for you as you're watching our next short documentary, to drop them into the Q&A function in the chat, or in the Q&A box for the webinar. We'll have a couple prepared questions for our panelists after we watch the second video, but we will also have an opportunity to get to your questions, or we can have folks raise their hands and ask them live at that point. Just seeing some of the responses we have here, and I know some other folks are filling it out, but the takeaways people are seeing is issues around trust and failure, but also honesty, home. There's a lot of mixed emotions coming up, it seems like, which I think is the one of the things we've been trying to get across in these stories, is that they are enraging, but they're also, we can do something about it if we put our minds to it. So thank you for filling that out, and I will
stop sharing and hand it back to Brianna so we can go to Texas.
The Rio Grande River is more than just a river and more than just water. It's a way of life.
This river is a lifeblood for our community.
We see ourselves as a community in the river.
El agua es vida y necesitamos que el agua no esté contaminada. Mi nombre es Rosa Sauceda y vivo aquí en Laredo por 30 años. He tenido que hervir, no sé, en mis 30 años muchas veces. Ya perdí la cuenta. Yo tengo años que no tomo agua de la llave. Cuando pongo un vaso con agua y lo checo, está muy sucia. Me enfermo del estómago cada que tomo. Y entonces, pura botella de agua, agua purificada. Estoy pagando por el agua de botellas, los paquetes de agua, $60 al mes, lo que equivale a pagar un recibo de agua. Sino que me lo descuenten de la renta porque yo estoy comprando el agua, ¿verdad? Pues es doble gasto, como quien dice, sí.
At the end of the day, water is life. I'm Tyler King. I'm a city council member here in Laredo, Texas. Moved here in April of 2020 during the pandemic and saw up close and personal a water bill notice that we had in February of 2022, which ultimately inspired me to run for city council to make water the #1 priority in the city of Laredo. We have two issues the way I see it. We have water quality issues and water quantity issues. We've had 8 water bill notices in the last 5 years, but we're also running up against time with the Rio Grande River. The earth's getting hotter every year and the river's getting drier every year. If we don't do anything, that's going to mean that our only source of drinking water, that's also our most affordable source of drinking water, will not be available and prices will go up. And so if we don't act, that by definition means that people are going to be paying more for water down the road.
When I think about Laredo, I think about the growth. I think about Laredo being the #1 inland port in the country, but that doesn't continue without water. Jesse Herford at the North American Development Bank. The bank is an instrument of both the U.S. and Mexican federal governments, and we're here to try to help diversify and identify other water sources for communities along the river during these tough times of drought. Once you have diversified water sources, it also keeps the price in check because you have water availability. When water becomes scarce, that's when it becomes very expensive.
My name is Martin Castro. I'm the Watershed Science Director at the Rio Grande International Studies Center, or RISC for short. I'm born and bred here in Laredo. I've lived here my entire life. I'm passionate about this work because I care about this community. I care about our river. Laredo gets 100% of its drinking water from the Rio Grande. It's one of the most endangered rivers in the United States. Climate change is here. It's affecting our community. It's affecting our water infrastructure system. And Laredo has to do something about it to meet those challenges. Some of the solutions that we as an organization are trying to come up with are real proactive solutions that will bring long-term benefits, both economically and environmentally.
We are maybe 100 yards from the Rio Grande River, and we are at Las Palmas Park. My name is Ameda Rubio. I'm an ecologist by training. I'm serving in the capacity here as an ecological consultant with the Zacate Creek Green District Coalition.
RISC is currently undertaking a $2 million riparian restoration project that's being facilitated through the USDA. We also secured a $1.5 million investment from Methodist Healthcare Ministries. The goals of this restoration project are to remove as many invasive plant and tree species and reforest ecologically with native plants and trees.
Invasive grasses are very thirsty. And if you know anything about, this region or this part of the world, because of climate change, it is getting much hotter and droughts are becoming prolonged and more intense. So thirsty grasses and thirsty trees are a bad situation, making it worse in this area that's already seeing prolonged drought and lack of rainfall. So we are trying to remove those plants and replace them with natives that take just enough and whatever they need from the landscape and survive and create a beautiful native green space for people to utilize and enjoy.
The unique aspect of this environmental project is the fact that it's being done in collaboration with our community.
The neighborhood right across from here, just like in the other side of the river, you're 100 yards that way, and 100 yards that way you come to the neighborhood of Azteca. It is one of the oldest historic neighborhoods in Laredo, Texas. Families have lived there through generations. The people that you see here are all from this neighborhood.
Yo soy residente de Azteca. Yo estoy bien contenta por pertenecer al equipo de la coalición Zacate Creek Las Palmas.
Mira para arriba, qué bonito.
Me da mucho gusto porque somos un gran equipo.
La unión hace la fuerza. Ya.
Y juntos estamos haciendo un mundo mejor para heredarlo a nuestros nietos, hijos, a las futuras generaciones.
We know that there is success to be found in thinking outside the box and looking into innovations with water resources. You have riparian restoration work happening on the ground, and you also have potentially a wastewater reuse project. A few years ago, we developed a model for a decentralized approach to wastewater treatment in Laredo, and it's called a Community Water Energy Resource Center. We call it QWERC for short. We're undertaking a feasibility study right now in collaboration with the City of Laredo and the North American Development Bank, who's actually funding the study. The project itself could reduce demand on our river. It could reduce our water rates. It could also generate revenue for the city. It could generate a return on investment much faster than any traditional water infrastructure could.
We need to be finding creative ways to reuse our effluent. Other cities across the country are doing it. In Texas, it hasn't been as common. It's been going deeper and deeper and deeper into the aquifers, and eventually, those aquifers run out. That is not a long-term sustainable solution. If Laredo can make this happen, it'll put Laredo on the map as a leader, but also it will reward our residents with more affordable water and drinking water. The key here is to prove to the community and to my fellow leaders that there are ways to invest in water infrastructure in a way that is environmentally sustainable, but also is good for our bottom line as well.
I've seen success stories in Tucson, I've seen success stories in Milwaukee, I've seen success stories in Pittsburgh, in Washington, D.C. There's no reason why we believe that Laredo cannot meet its water challenges in these environmentally sustainable and climate resilient ways. It just takes, I think, the right leadership, the right minds that can be put together, and the right investment from the right sources to really solve these challenges. There has not been a single instance of any major city that I've visited where the city alone solved these water challenges on their own.
Without adequate investment, ultimately cities and counties and even states are not going to be able to do enough to make a difference. And eventually, the people are the ones going to be paying more for it. We've been at the forefront of environmental challenges like climate change and also systemic neglect and underinvestment by federal and state officials and agencies that it really makes us want to do more for ourselves. We've been very lucky to be a part of the Water Equity and Climate Resilience Caucus with PolicyLink. It's really transformed the type of advocacy that we've been able to do over the last couple of years. Now we've taken our advocacy to the state, we've taken it to the highest echelons of federal government in ways that I could not have imagined.
Our local leadership here in Laredo definitely needs to be looking into more investments in its water infrastructure, but it is up to Laredo itself to go after those funds, to be proactive and go to DC and be the voice for Laredo, be the voice for our community, because those funds are not going to be given to us easily. We're going to have to earn them and make them know that Laredo is worthy of investment.
Wonderful. I love all the memories that come back from making these two stories and getting to share with you. So we have about 20 minutes for Q&A, which is great. While we're moving into that mode, I'm gonna share another poll question for our audience. So I'm just curious to hear from you all what the different solutions, be it individual projects or policies that you heard from these two stories. And again, encourage folks, if you have questions, to put them in the Q&A box or the chat or raise your hand. But wanted to get started with a couple of questions for all our panelists. And these will go to Madison and Nina and Martine, but Yasmin, if you have anything to add, please feel free to chime in as well. So my first question is, these stories highlight affordability challenges faced by two different communities. And so I'm curious for you all, now that you're seeing each other's stories, just what differences and also what connections came up for you. And Madison, I hope you don't mind if I put you on the spot first.
That's all right. So real briefly, some of the differences, one thing that I wanted to point out when thinking of both films is how in Texas, in Laredo, like, I love that the whole community is like working together. And honestly, when it comes to the riparian restoration project that is happening on the river, that is what I would consider like healing from water, like being able to work as a community, work as a team together when it comes to seeing change and the impact and being proud of what they're creating. I just thought that was just so beyond powerful. And also, I really was like so impressed with Dr. Tyler King from the film, the local city council member, him just being just an everyday resident and saw that bull notice in 2022. And he was just like, you know what? I'm from here. I'm from this community. I want to see if I can help and do something. And I just think it's very powerful to see, residents step into local leadership roles and being able to not just campaign on a promise, but fulfill a promise. And I just thought that was just very powerful to see. And that was just a couple of the differences I wanted to mention, but I know Nina's going to explain other differences as well when it comes to her turn. But some of the things that are similar that I wanted to briefly mention was the water loss and water line breaks. In Martin County, just real briefly, we have had a lot of water breaks historically in our community. And, just seeing the resemblance, water loss causes, affordability concerns, and it just kind of trickles downward. And extreme weather events, like we experience droughts in very particular ways, but we have too much water sometimes. And so floodings and deep freezes are some of our biggest concerns that we fight in battle. But extreme weather across the board is impacting water infrastructure. And if we're not more resilient within our systems, especially around extreme weather, the system will have a harder time to be resilient and do the job that needs to be done. So I will pause there and pass it over to Nina.
Yeah, yeah, I echo a lot of that. But one of the things I noticed with our similarities is that the people don't trust the drinking water and they're buying bottled water. I mean, that just doubles the expense problems. And our problem, of course, with the sludge spill, we just totally lost faith. This generation of people don't even remember the sludge spill. They don't know why they don't trust their water. They just know they don't trust their water. They don't trust their leaders because EPA treated us as bad as the coal company. And they were buddying up with the coal company. And so when people lose faith, it's really hard to get it back again. Some of the differences, definitely lack of industry here. In 1964, President Johnson started the war on poverty here because this was one of the poorest communities in the country. And then we went through the coal boom of the 70s, 80s, and 90s. People built nice homes, but lost their wells because of the coal boom in a whole nother sense. And so now we have very little industry. It is now probably school systems the biggest employment agency in the county, like it was in '64. We have the problem with the infrastructure is we're trying to fix old infrastructure in old ways. That's just ridiculous. Y'all are having ways that are innovative and cool. And we've got a pump that was supposed to be $500,000 in 2018, still doesn't work. And so we're paying about 30,000 a month for a diesel pump. And so we could have bought electric pumps, but we're having to actually fight our government in order to get a system that will even just work just for basic necessities.
Thanks, Nina, and thank you everyone who left answers in our poll. It was really interesting to see some of the common themes, and we'll come back to solutions that our panelists are working on both nationally and more local at home. So appreciate seeing all those. Martine, you're up next.
Alrighty, well, gosh, I don't know how much I can say that Nina and Madison have already covered in some regards, but I think so. What I found really interesting about y'all's story in Kentucky is that it's the same. It's very similar, like you said, Madison. I think like very similar infrastructure issues, but you're trying to get the um, well, you're trying to fight for these funds, and not only that, get the attention of state officials to provide the funding for the repairs needed just to like get by. Like so, that is a huge struggle, and I sympathize and empathize with that because one of the most challenging parts, and this is where a lot of the similarity I feel comes into the picture here with our story in Laredo, is a lot of the funds that we've been able to acquire for these projects, um, you know, we have, of course, we have allies in DC and Congress folks that can do everything they can to, and folks in the state and in the state as well, in the state legislature, and they'll do everything they can to bring these resources to our attention and say, this is an opportunity that can help fix these problems. But ultimately, and I think I mentioned this in the film, in our film, is that it's up to the community to rise up, you know, get together, partner, and go after these funds because they're just not going to be given to you. And I think I think it's a really interesting dynamic between both communities and like kind of stepping up to the table to solve these challenges because I think our two governments are doing all they can, and then but then you have to come in with like community um, help with other folks and folks that are creative and can work outside of the normal government bureaucracy and then aren't always, bogged down by all the red tape and all the administrative hurdles to go after these funds and working with your electeds. And that's one of the reasons why we were able to secure some this funding to do some of this work. Our local governments, our local anchor institutions would have never done any of this on their own. I can say that with full confidence because in the entire history of the city, I think there's been very few cases where a project like this ever, manifested from within, city government. It's very, very rare. But so it literally was left up to the community to do this work. And I really want to emphasize too that what I said in the film about communities being able to solve these challenges on their own is just, I believe, it's strongly believe it's impossible because I have, again, I know I said this already once, but I have not been to a community where tackling such huge challenges related to water infrastructure as a result of, the effects of climate change and drought and so on. There isn't a single community I visited where the city government itself or the county government, whatever the case is, they were able to solve it all on their own. That is extremely rare. Every community I've been to, in Arizona and DC, I've seen the advocacy nonprofit sector partner with its county and city governments together. When they work together, man, you can do. They have done some incredible work, especially like in Tucson and in Milwaukee. I mean, just incredible. And I think that's what I'm really my ultimate wish here in Laredo and for Martin County as well would be to finally see the collaboration working together with like the nonprofit community-based, organizations and city government working together hand in hand without any sort of like, you know, uh, you know, bureaucratic, political, territorial issues. I think that's like that is on my bucket list. I dream to see that day where I will finally be able to hold hands with my counterparts in city government and so again, just a few of my insights. So thank you all very much.
Thanks, Martine. Um, I I know the next question will be a challenging one, but we've got an audience that's full of both kind of individual people, but also advocates in their communities and folks who work for state agencies or water utilities. And so for this audience, if you could leave with one main takeaway that you want them to have about your community's affordability challenges, what would it be? So we'll start with you, Madison, because I saw you ready to go.
I'll just briefly mention because I want to make sure we have enough time for Nina to give her answer. I'm just going to rehash what Mary Crummer from our film said. Water affordability and water quality go hand in hand. And so when it comes to Martin County's water story, I feel as if when it comes to water affordability at large, if we can have rates that are realistic and achievable for our community members to pay, to invest back into the system itself so it can continue the general operations and management, build more resilience for the system when it comes to extreme weather events, and reduce water loss. It's in a realistic process and way that it's going to support both avenues and both places. I just feel as if like that is the biggest takeaway of one of the biggest takeaways, because Nina's going to say the other, but one of the biggest takeaways is like seeing the relationship and how water affordability and quality go hand in hand, but also consumers paying their bills into the system supports the growth and the development of the infrastructure for all. So Nina.
Okay, so my takeaway is you have to have trust in the system. Honestly, nobody wants to work for the water system if you don't trust the water system, and not having workers is a problem. I want people to understand our water is not toxic. The sludge spill is not the problem. We have worked with the University of Kentucky to do testing. We did 1 year of testing where we went to 97 different homes. We tested for the things that might have been left over from sludge spill. We tested for disinfection byproducts, which is a problem. And we found that our water is very much like everyone else's water across this area. And disinfection byproducts are a problem, but we need to understand that's a problem everywhere. But companies and water districts need to be totally honest, because if people don't trust the system, they're going to go out and buy bottled water unnecessarily and just help the bottled water companies. Also, I know that they talked a lot about boil water advisories, and that is something that hits me every time I hear it, because there was a time when I was not on the water board at the time. I was only with Martin County Concerned Citizens, and our water would be shut off. People would be saying their water was off, and we never got a boil water advisory because they thought it made them look bad. Well, that made me distrust the water system. And that made everybody who understood what boil water advisories are about distrust the system. You have to have a boil water advisory if your water's been off, or people will get sick. So even the bad news, they got to know the bad news, but they got to understand it in context. So they have to be able to trust what the water district is telling them.
Before we go to you, Martine, Yasmin, I know you wanted to kind of emphasize that point and talk a little bit about the role that a national convener that's bringing community organizations from all across the country together to Washington. So I would love to hand it to you for a minute.
Thanks, Sarah. We know we need culture change in DC. For those of you that have tracked the president's budget that came out last Friday, one of the statements in there is that cutting state revolving funds, the federal government doesn't need to pay for water infrastructure anymore. This is saying the state should pay for it on their own. States have limited ability to pay for it. Utilities have limited ability to pay for it. The culture change that we need isn't specific to this administration. Federal funding for water infrastructure has significantly declined over time. But the culture change we need is for folks like Nina, Madison, Martine to come to DC with us and speak directly to who they have employed to represent them, to hold them accountable and to build that trust back up. So, I get asked the question from community-based organizations all the time. We have limited capacity. We can't do advocacy at the local level, at the state level, and the federal level. Joining networks like the caucus or any other network is really helpful because you can prioritize where you spend your time and you can do a little piece of the advocacy. So actually, Nina and Martine joined us in DC last year, and it was incredible to have their voices, and we're very grateful.
Thank you. And Martine, as we go to you, I wanted to give you an opportunity to answer this question, but also get us started on our final question of our program, which is about the solutions that you're pushing for at the local, state, and federal level.
Awesome. Well, I'll touch briefly on the second question, and I think the biggest sort of suggestion that I can make, and I want to sort of emphasize this to fellow advocates that are on this call with us today, and my recommendation is to not be afraid and be willing to work with your city or county government, as hard as that is, as hard as it'd be like, oh my God, I can't work with these guys. One of the things that has made our work particularly so effective is the fact that as an organization, as a community-based organization, the fact that we are willing to work and talk to folks in our local government and county government. And these are folks that, again, may not necessarily agree with our work or what we represent. Um, but it's important because what I have noticed in my career in trying to push an initiative like the one you learned about in our video, in our documentary, excuse me, our wastewater reuse feasibility study, is that if you decide, or as a community-based organization, if you end up, if you push too hard to one side, for example, a community-based organization may end up isolating itself from being able to do any work. They push so hard, and they say, we refuse to work with this person, or because we hate this guy, or whatever the case is. And that community, that organization, or that community of advocates will no longer be able to work on any initiative because they simply can't see each other face to face, or don't agree on one thing, and they and And I understand there's personalities, there's egos, there's a lot of indifferences, but sometimes to push these projects forward in the interests of the community and the constituents who are going to benefit the most, those have to be put aside temporarily. And I'll give you an idea. This feasibility study project I have been working on, it's taken over 5 years to get to this point. At the very beginning, when I started my job here at Risk, that was one of my first tasks. You know, we had a model, we had a concept, then we had to work really, really hard with local government officials, elected officials to get this initiative off the ground and get them to buy in and say, yes, we will do this in partnership with you. And it took a long time. The first 2 or 3 years of us trying to push this through and get folks and get council and local city leaders and department heads to agree to this was extremely difficult. We got plenty of no's. We got shut down plenty of times. We got rejected plenty of times. And there were many times I felt like giving up because I felt that it was a lost cause and it wasn't worth pursuing. But we persevered. And quoting one of my mentors and one of the founders of our organization, he used to say, you have to be the gentle thorn in people's sides. You have to keep just pushing until you get somewhere. So it's again, all I'm saying is work alongside indifferences, and that can be really effective in some cases. I can't say it'll work in every case, but there is something to be said about trying to work with folks that may not agree with you or may not like what you represent, but sometimes that's the only way in order to push these kinds of initiatives. And you'll have to remind me, Sarah, on the second question. I apologize.
No, you hit it, Martine. So I will turn to Nina and Madison to bring us home in our last couple minutes with what they're working on in Kentucky, and then we'll close out for the afternoon.
I'll be
Alrighty.
real.
Thank you.
Thank you, Martine. So real quick, on the local level, like I mentioned earlier, I work for a nonprofit organization known as Like and Knowledge, and I've been supporting doing community-based research here in the region. Like Nina was mentioning, we've done a couple water testing projects, tap water testing. Also within Like and Knowledge, I've been able to create what we call the Martin County Water Resilience Toolkit, and I'm going to drop that in the chat here below. And this is a toolkit that supports sharing water knowledge on a local, state, and federal level, along with what you do as a customer when it comes to your water rights, along with questions around affordability, understanding your water, what's coming out of your tap, and then just knowing where your water comes from, and just bringing that sense of education and awareness and understanding is what I'm trying to do when it comes to my efforts around, just the conversation around water quality and water affordability going hand in hand. And then also creating what we like to call within Lycan brave spaces, community meetings. And this right here is another toolkit known as the Community Engagement Guide, where it's right now getting updated at the moment. But this is for any individuals in here that are interested to bring people together to talk about water and wastewater. This is a guide that we've created within Lycan that supports how to bring those people together, how to bring the community together when it comes to talking about your water, your wastewater, and extreme weather events. So, and then I'll pass it over to Nina when it comes to state and federal.
Well, locally, I started as a thorn in everyone's side with Martin County Concerned Citizens, and we intervened in the Public Service Commission investigation. And now I'm on the water board, and sometimes I'm still a thorn in the side. But at the same time, I think that we are working together to really work with getting an honest look at our system. As far as the state goes, the state finally put $75 million into the fund, to the budget for water systems, infrastructure problems, but $750 million were requested. And of course, that was only the people who could get the thing in time. We did, but we did not get a penny of that. That was in 2025 because it was done wrong. But now this year we're hoping to get more, but there's less money this year. There's a lot less money, a lot more people trying to get it. We're all just fighting over the scraps around here. And then federal, like you said, we went to DC last year for trying to get LIWOP funding. And from what I understand, our representative, Hal Rogers, last I heard, he has signed on to that. We'll see how far it goes, but fingers crossed. So we're trying in every way we can. And I just love the fact that Madison is with us. She is just so exciting and brings a lot of togetherness for our community.
Thank you, everyone. As we close, I feel like it truly takes a village to live, but also to work on these issues and seeing the connections that people are making both within their own communities, but also across different cities and towns and areas that are working on the same issues, making connections, sharing ideas, advocating together on the national level is really powerful. We will definitely follow up via email with everyone who registered for this event and to share some of the activities that the Water Equity and Climate Resilience Caucus is doing for Water Week next week, while many advocates are heading again to Washington, D.C. to talk to their representatives, and encourage you all to stay engaged, take action, and appreciate your time being with us today. Thank you.
Thank you.